The exercise files for today's course are located in the video description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hello everyone and welcome into Google Sheets Introduction. My name is Joe and I am so glad you're here and excited to have you join us for our Google Sheets adventure. In this course, we will help you learn the essentials of Google Sheets, whether you're a complete beginner or just looking to sharpen your skills. This course will guide you through the basics of Google Sheets, from data entry and formatting to simple calculations and functions. By the end, you'll feel confident using Google Sheets for various tasks.
Looking to support our channel and get a great deal? Become a member today to unlock ad-free videos. That's right, your favorite courses without a single ad. Interested in a specific video? Purchase one of our ad-free courses individually. Looking for even more? Gain access to exams, certificates, and exclusive content at LearnitAnytime.com. More information can be found in the video description below.
To get to Google Sheets, the first thing we'll do is open up a web browser. I'm going to be using Google Chrome today, but you're more than welcome to use whichever browser that you're comfortable with. So I'm going to open up my Google Chrome here. And in the top right-hand corner, you'll see your Google Apps. Now, if you're not signed into this yet, you might have to. You might just have to go in and then sign in using your Google account, your Gmail here, and then whatever password you set up. But then once you're signed in, you can just click on those apps. And this is where you'll see all the different Google apps you have available to you. Now, the one that we're going to be focusing on for this course is Google Sheets. So we'll give that a click. And then once we open up our Google Sheets there, it's going to bring us to the landing page. Now, the landing page is great because this is where we can either create a blank worksheet, we can see some of the templates that Google has available to us, we can access what we've been working on the previous 30 days, and not only that, we can also search for any of our files up top. So this is the nice, simple way to access all of your different Google Sheets, or being able to access those templates, or being able to access this blank spreadsheet, which that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's all go over to blank spreadsheet. We're going to click on that, and we're going to build a financial ledger, or maybe not. We'll figure out what we'll do. Maybe we'll do something with, we'll switch it up. We'll do something with students or something. We'll have fun with it though. So here, I'm going to just click into blank spreadsheet. And right away, we are now in our main interface. So you'll see up top, we have a way to name this sheet. And I'm going to do that right away. And once you name it, it'll stay that name unless you want to rename it again. You're more than welcome to. And I'm just going to call this, let's do this one. Student scoring information. Student scoring information. I'm going to press enter, and it saves right away to your Google Drive. So that's pretty cool. Right away, we notice that it has a automatic saving. Now, taking a look at this interface, you'll see right over to the right, it does start to ask you, hey, do you want to build some pre-built tables? Here's a couple other features that you have access to. So this is pretty cool. Once again, bringing in those templates here, and look at that. So if you are new, or maybe you don't know where to start, you can quickly go in and take a look at all the different things it has available to you. But we're going to have fun. We're going to create our own from scratch. So we'll click the X on that, and we're going to just start from blank here. Another thing that's really important with this is up top, you'll see your different menus. We have the file menu, and when you click on it, you'll see the menu then drop down, and you can look at all the things you can do in the file menu: edit, view, insert, format, data, tools, extensions, and even help. If you do need to search the menus, you're more than welcome to do that. And also, if you like this training, of course you can utilize it, but if you do want more resources to training, Google does have their own here under training. So that's pretty cool. And also they have their function lists and keyboard shortcuts if you want to learn those. But we'll go through a couple of those throughout the training. Now, besides that, we also have what's known as our quick access tools. And these quick access tools are some of the most frequently used tools by Google Sheets. You can once again search the menus. That's the same as going to help and clicking search the menu. So all of these tools here are actually up top here as well. But these are the most accessible ones. Undo, redo, print, format painter, right? Or paint format, copies of format. You have zoom, so you can zoom in and out of the worksheet. You have currency formats, percentage formats, decimal increasing and decreasing, and also more formats as well, where you can change what the number looks like. Always remember format means the appearance. You then have your tools for the text itself. What kind of font do you want to use? Increase or decrease the font size, some formatting like bold, italicize, stripe through, and also changing the text color. You can also change the background of the cells. So if you want a cell to be a certain color, you're more than welcome to. You can add borders to those cells, and then also merge the cells as well. You can align your text if you want it center or to the right or to the left. You can do vertical alignments, top, middle, bottom, and also text wrapping if you want to do overflow or wrapping or clip, and then rotation of your text. So there's a ton of different options here. A couple of the other ones down here are inserting links, comments. You can insert charts for visualizing your data, turn on filters, or take a look at some of the filter views that you have. We'll talk about this in another session. And then also functions, all the different functions, and then all of them are categorized. You can either go to arrays, database, data, engineering. So they have a ton of them here that you can look at. Now, when we're talking about using the interface here, one of the most important things is knowing where you are in the worksheet. So for instance, what Google Sheets does well is it utilizes what's known as columns and rows. So that's how we reference cells. These are the columns going across here, and these columns are indicated by alphabet, right? So characters A, B, C, D. We then have, of course, going down here, the rows. And these rows are indicated by numeric value. So just numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you select into, let's say, a certain cell, like right here, I'm selected on B5, you're always going to name the column first, column B, and then what row you're selected on, 5. And you'll even see over here in our name box, it tells you you're selected in B5. Another thing that's really important when we're talking about cell reference is what's inside of a cell, right? So right next to the name box where we just saw it tells you what cell you're in, you'll see also we have our formula bar. And this formula bar is super important because it tells us the truest value of a cell. So you might be thinking, well, what does that mean? Well, let's say I did something like this. I click into a cell and I do this. And then I click into the cell and I do this. Well, looking at these, they look identical, right? They don't look like they're different at all, but they're completely different. One of these values is a 1, and one of these values is some sort of calculation. But which one's which? Well, that's where the formula bar comes in. If I click into this cell, it tells me that this is actually a calculation. It's 1 plus 0, which equals 1. And it tells me that this cell, I just typed in the number 1. So even though they look the same, they're completely different. And that's why the formula bar is super important, not only for writing formulas, but for knowing what really is in these cells. So I'm just going to clear that out. But try this out for your own real quick. I want you to sign into Google Sheets. I want you to open up a blank worksheet, take a look around, get familiar with some of the tools that they have to offer. And then when we come back, we're going to start to enter in some data into this worksheet. Now that we know a little bit more about the interface, we're going to start entering data. And today we're going to do our student scoring information. Now, in order to do that, we can't just start entering data in. Like I can't just start entering a bunch of numbers because you might be thinking, well, what are those numbers? It's always a good idea to label your columns, and those are known as headers. So we're going to create a title first. Let's click into A1, and we're just going to call this student scoring. And then in A3, we're going to start to put our headers in to really describe what kind of data is going into our columns. Starting off with our student ID. I'm then going to press the Tab key to go over to the next cell. Now, you can either press the Tab key next to the Q on your keyboard to go to the right, or you can use Shift Tab to go to the left. You can press Enter to confirm and then go down if you press Enter twice, or you can hold the Shift key and press Enter twice to go back up. You can also just simply use arrow keys or click into each cell. So totally up to you. There's no right or wrong on those. But yeah, let's continue to fill in what kind of information is going in here. So we'll have the first name, and then we'll have the last name. Let's also do the email, the birthday. We'll say birth date. Let's do also class attendance. Now I want to do the class attendance for each quarter. So we'll have attendance quarter 1, and we could just say QTR1. But before we go and have to rewrite that a ton of times, I actually want to talk about this real quick. You'll see that whenever we click into each cell, we actually get this little ball icon, right? And that little dot or ball is actually autofill. What it does is it follows a pattern. Now, I'm going to show you how it can fill in series, and then later on when we get into calculations, functions, and formulas, we'll talk about how it works with those. But for now, let's say I want to just repeat the number 1. I can actually do that by clicking and dragging, and you'll see it just repeats the number 1 as many times as I want. I can also choose to do sequential order. For instance, I'll put a 1 and then a 2. And now I can say, okay, I'm going to either click and drag, or after you select those 2, you can do a double click, and you'll see it's in sequential order. Because we're telling the system, hey, listen, we're going from 1 to 2, which is increments of 1. I can do 2 to 4 and do increments of 2. Select them both, double click on the ball. There we go. But what's awesome is not only that, we can also do things like dates. I can put in a date. Let's do this date. And then I can double click and it'll put it in sequential order. Pretty cool. I can also do January, double click, or even non-abbreviated January, double click, Monday, day of the week, or even non-abbreviated Monday. Or another thing I can do is maybe I want to do week 1, and it will automatically put it in sequential order. And not only can we do this going down vertically, but we can do this horizontally. For example, with our attendance for each quarter, I can just click and drag. That'll be quarter 2, that'd be 3, that'd be 4. And look at that. How awesome is that? We don't have to sit there and write it 4 times. We just write it once, and then it does it for us. Now I'm going to take all of this. I want to delete this out. So you could just select it all and press the delete key, not the backspace. You could do backspace if you want, but I always like to use the delete key. So I'll show that again. You can either select it all and use delete key or backspace, but I always use the delete key. Next up, we're going to put into column J3, we'll do a total attendance. So we'll just say total attendance. And you might notice as of right now that we're cutting some stuff off, right? We're cutting off the 1, the 2, the 3, and now the 4. We're going to talk about how to fix that in a second, but let's put in the rest of our headers here. We're also going to keep track of scoring, right? So I want to see what they scored on test 1, test 2, and then their final test. We'll then in column N3 put in their average score. And then in column O3, we'll put in whether they've passed. So we'll say pass/fail. Now, once again, this is pushing really far. We can't see everything, and we have to also fix the attendance. You can do this by going up to the top between the columns where you want to change the width, for instance, F and G, and I can click and drag to make this bigger, click and drag, or click and drag to make it smaller. But if you want it to be an exact fit, you could just give a quick double click and it will auto size it for you. 1, 2. Look how nice that looks. 1, 2. Now, if you want to fix this all at once, let's say they're all squished in a little bit and you want everything to be auto-sized really nicely, you can actually select right here underneath the name box, this little rectangle. And when you click on that, it selects every single column and row. Once you do that, you can go between any column and double click, and it will actually auto adjust the entire spreadsheet. So that's a little trick that I like to use. So try this out on your own, and then once we come back, we're going to start entering in some data. Now that we have our headers and everything is auto with, we will now start to put in our information. So as we enter in the data here, I'll just enter in some fake data for 10 students. So I'm going to do that autofill technique I showed you before, where you put in a 1 and then a 2, and then we can just click and drag from our autofill, and we'll fill in 10 students. After this, we'll then put in some names. So let's just do some fake names here. John, Joe, Jane, Smith. And then you can take your time with this, pause the video. I'll go through a little quicker, but you're more than welcome to pause at any moment. We'll add in just a couple of fake names here. And you're going to love what we learn in a second. This is going to be a lot of fun when we create the emails. So just a couple more here. Max Walker and Olivia Lewis. All right. So now let's say that we want to put in some emails. I'm going to make those emails a little bigger by just clicking and dragging the column D width, because I know I want those to be a full email. Now for the email, we're just going to do a first name, last name @email.com. Very simple and just fake. So you might be thinking, well, wow, that's going to take us a minute to do, right? We have to put in John Doe, Alice. Or you might be thinking, well, Joe, I've heard there's ways to do strings of text like concatenation and different advanced functions you can use. And all of that would be correct. But there is an awesome new feature known as Smart Fill that is accessible to us within Google Sheets. And what Smart Fill does is kind of like autofill, where it follows a pattern, but it's following a pattern with our names here, our strings of text. So watch this. Let's all click into D4 and type in john.doe@email.com. And then we'll press enter. We'll then do the next one, jane.smith@email.com. And then press enter. Now when we do the last one, you're going to see something here. It says, hey, Smart Fill, we have a formula suggestion. We think we can fill these cells using a formula to help you out so that you don't have to continue to do all that work. And I'm going to say, you know what? Thank you so much, Google Sheets. And let's click the little check mark here. Or you can also use Control plus Shift plus Y to do the rest of the Smart Fill. Now I'm just going to do a little check mark. And how awesome is this? And you might have heard me just say, hey, we might have wanted to do concatenation, right? Well, it is actually using a concat function up top. So it's using the concatenate function as saying, let's take the first name with a period and the last name, and then add in @email.com. So it's doing it for us, and we didn't even need to know how to do that function. Now, later on, if you decide that you don't want these to be functions, you're more than welcome to copy these And you can copy something by right-clicking, and cut means to actually take it and move it. Copy means to take it, make a copy, and then move it. And paste means, well, to paste it in there. But there are a couple of really cool options here under Paste Special, where we can copy or cut the function result and paste it as a value instead, so it's not an actual function. That way it's just the email. So I'm going to take all this, I'm going to right-click, I'm going to cut it, and then I'm going to right-click, Paste Special, and I'm going to say Values Only. That way it's actually a value instead of a function. Pretty cool. Now we can fill in the rest of the data. All right, but before we fill in the rest of the data, try that out, fill in some of those data sets there, and also use Smart Fill. So now that we know a little bit more about Smart Fill, we're going to fill in the rest of the data here. And once again, you can pause this video at any time you want to. I'm going to enter in some fake dates here. We'll do just some random ones. I'm just using some data that we looked up from artificial intelligence, which is something that is amazing. It allows for us instructors and trainers to actually come up with fake data a lot quicker. So we don't have to go and do name generation or anything like that. We could just say, hey, give us 10 names and 10 different birth dates, and then we'll just come up with a bunch of them. So that's how I've been using it. But of course, people use AI all types of ways. But once again, I'll be just filling these out, and we'll fill in all this data. We're going to just use a random number. You don't have to do that part with me when we do fill this out. You can actually just fill out the numbers. I'll do the same thing we sort of did with the email, where I use a function to come up with random numbers, but then I will utilize the cut and then paste special just to add them in as values, so they're not constantly changing. You'll see what I mean in a moment. But we'll just finish entering this data here. We have a couple more. And I think that's it. Awesome. Okay, so we got some birthdays in there. So now I'm going to, once again, just use a function. You do not have to do this with me. I'm going to use something known as rand between, where we just pick a random number between 2 and 5. So it's a random integer. It's known as the rand between function. It'll ask for a low part of the number, 2, a high part, which is 5. And when I press enter, it's just a random number between 2 and 5. And I can autofill, and we'll learn about that later on. And I'm just doing that for quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. The only problem is if something changes in your data, like if I write hello here, these change again. So we want to be sure that those aren't constantly changing. So I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to right-click, cut it, right-click, and paste as the values only. So once again, you just copy the same numbers that you see here, but don't use rand between like I did. That was just to get the numbers. So take a moment to fill in and enter in the rest of the data. And then when we come back, we're actually going to talk about how we can find the total attendance and what the difference between calculations, functions, and formulas are. All right, so we're going to have a lot of fun with that. Before we go and try to find the total attendance, what we're going to do is talk about the difference between calculations, formulas, and functions. So this part's really for you to just sit back, relax for a moment. I'm going to actually add a worksheet. So you'll see we do have a sheet 1, and you're always more than welcome to click on that little drop down if you want to rename the sheet, if you want to change the color of the sheet or protect it or duplicate it, you can. But I'm just going to click the little plus icon to add another sheet here, just so I can showcase the difference between calculations, formulas, and functions. And once again, you don't have to do this with me. We will have some fun with formulas, functions, and calculations in a little bit. So let's say I have a little bit of data here, right? Maybe I have some numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what I want to do is I actually want to calculate the sum of those numbers. Well, that's great, and Google Sheets has many ways to do this. But which way is the most efficient way? Well, that's where it comes down to calculations, formulas, and functions. I'm going to showcase the difference between these and ones that are really great to use and ones that you'll probably never use. Anytime we do use calculations, formulas, or functions, we have to start off with a universal sign of mathematics, which is our equal sign. That prompts the system to know that we're trying to do some sort of calculation, formula, or function. Now that we have the equal sign, I'm going to do a calculation. A calculation, it sounds like calculator, right? And it works very similar to a calculator. After I put my equals, I just type in the numbers like a calculator. So I want to add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. And when I press enter, I get 15. That worked really great, but that was a little slow, right? It wasn't too fast. And another thing is, what happens if our data changes, right? Data's always changing. I go in here and do something like that. Well, look at that. The data doesn't update. So that's known as being dynamic or not dynamic. And in this case, calculations are not dynamic. And I'll change that back to a 5. So calculations are slow and they're not dynamic. And you might be thinking, well, when would we use them? And I'll just say that you'll probably never use calculations in Google Sheets, unless you just want to do a quick calculation of numbers that's temporary and then delete it. If it has nothing to do with your data, you'd probably use it. But if you're working with data, calculations are not the way to go. That's where formulas step in, right? That's the next step up. See, formulas are a little different because they're not calculating just the number values, right? The numbers. They're calculating whatever's in the cell. So we're going to start off and do equals. And instead of typing 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, I'm going to do whatever's in B3 plus whatever's in B4 plus B5 plus B6 plus B7. You'll even see it does a little color code for you. I love that. And when I press enter, there we go. We get the answer. Now, I will admit that was still slow, but is it dynamic? Well, let's take a look. I'm going to change that 5 to a 15, and there it is. How cool is that, right? It is dynamic. Awesome. So let's take a look at formulas next and talk about why we would use them, right? So formulas, we would use them, even though they're slow, they are dynamic, as we just saw. We would use them most of the time for multiplying. I use formulas a lot for multiplying, and also dividing, because we don't really have a function to divide well. I mean, there's functions out there for multiplying and dividing, but formulas are going to work way more efficient. So I always say formulas are really great, once again, if you're doing any multiplying or dividing of cells. And now we have our last thing, which is functions. Functions are actually formulas. They're formulas that Google pre-created already for us to use. Now, there's a huge list of functions. You can just go to your quick access toolbar and you'll see the little functions icon. And when you click on that icon, it'll tell you all your aggregate functions like sum, average, count, max, and min. And then it also has all of your functions all categorized. And you can even learn more functions that are available. And they're always adding new ones, like this one right here. This is awesome. They now are using regex. And regex is a unique code that you can use to extract things, match them, replace them. It's pretty cool. But they're constantly adding all different types of things. Lookups, right? The new X lookup. Awesome. But we're just going to keep it simple for today. We are using the sum function, right? The sum function allows for us to add things together. You'll always see your top aggregates right up top here. So we're going to click in. Once again, any calculation formula or function starts off with an equal sign. We're going to choose what function we want. I'm using the sum function. We're going to press the tab key right after you write your function, right next to that Q on your keyboard. If you press that tab key, it opens up the parentheses, and then you can select a whole range of cells. Right? When you select one cell, it's just a cell, and you select a range of cells like that. So you'll hear that terminology often. And when I press enter, I get the answer. Now it will do some autofill here, it looks like. I don't know what it's trying to autofill, so I'll say no on that one. But if I wasn't teaching this, this is how fast this would be. Ready? Equals sum, tab, select, enter. So functions are very fast. Not only that, are they dynamic? Well, let's take a look. They are, they update. So when something changes in our data, it actually updates, so it is dynamic. So really, if we're looking at this, calculations are something that we'll never really use when we're dealing with our data. Formulas we'll use when we're dealing with multiplying or dividing data. And functions we'll use for everything else, for more complex situations. So really, we're only going to ever use formulas and functions. But now that we know the difference between those, we're actually going to go back over. I'll just delete the sheet here. Let's delete it. Click OK. And now we're going to talk about using formulas or functions. I'll just zoom back out to get the total attendance. And you're all probably thinking, well, what would we use? What would be the most efficient? Well, I just want to add up these cells right here. So I'm going to use a sum function because that was the easiest one, right? It's the fastest. So in J4, let's do equals sum. And you'll even notice that it's like, Joe, we see what you want to do. You want to calculate all of the attendance. So it kind of guides you too. I love that about Google Sheets. It always has a guide. And that's actually the correct formula, right there. So I'm going to press the tab key. And if you just want to do it on your own, you're more than welcome to. You can still click and drag just to practice. But when we press enter, look what it does. It then says, well, since we did the first one with you, do you want us to do the rest of them? I'm going to say, of course, I want you to save me time. I'm going to click the checkbox. And you'll see now it's doing, right, F4 times I4. F5 through I5. It's summing F6 through I6, F7 through I7. So it's constantly using what's known as relative reference, right? It's relative to the one before it. It's following a pattern all the way down. So take a moment, try that out on your own, and then I'll have you do this again, but with a different function. Right now we just use the sum function. We're going to talk about the average function next. We've learned about the sum function, which we saw was really amazing to help us find the total attendance and also use autofill to fill in the rest of the relative data. Well, the next thing we're going to do here is put in the test results, so the grades, and then we'll see the average score. And we're going to use the average function to do this. Now, to make things quick again, what I'll do is I will go through, I'm going to use the ran between, and then you can pause the video and start copying the same scores that I wrote down. That way you are able to have access to the same exact average once you try this out. All right, so let's try this together. I'm going to fill these in, and then you can pause the video and fill them in as well. All right, so now that we have our test scores in, and once again, you can pause the video and take a look at these and put in the same ones as me, we're going to find the average. Now, to use the average function, what we'll do is we'll say equals. And once we put in our equal sign, we'll then start typing out the function we want, which is the average function. You'll see the minute we start typing in average, it's the first one that pops up here. Once we click on that, it'll fill in the rest and even open the parentheses for us. And then we can choose the average of test 1, 2, and 3. Now, once we press enter, you'll see right away it says, hey, we suggest autofill. And once again, this is super important. It'll allow for us to go through and say, yeah, you know what? This is what I want. I want you to fill in the rest because I want the average. And I'll click the little check mark, and there we go. Now, looking at this, you'll see some of them come with a long list of decimals. And if you want this to be a little more shorter, you're always welcome to format. Now, you can format numbers as percentages, as currencies, monetized amounts, or you can even format it so it doesn't show so many decimal places. So I'm going to select everything I want to affect, and I'm going to go over to my toolbar towards the beginning, and this is where you'll see all the different tools for formatting, currencies, percentages, or increasing or decreasing your decimal places. So I'm going to click on decrease decimal places because I do want to decrease them, and I want them to be whole numbers. And I think that looks great. So now that we have our averages, the last thing we're going to do is talk about being able to now take their average score and see if they pass or fail. But we don't want to do this manually, right? We want to use a function, and this function is going to be a really fun one. It's called the if function. It's a Boolean factor, which means we're going to ask the question, are they passing, right? And if they are passing, then put pass, if that's true. If it's not true, then we'll put fail. So we're going to automate this. It's going to be a lot of fun. But try out the average, and then we'll get into the if, and then we'll talk about how we can start to format the entire worksheet to look really cool. The next function we're going to learn about is the if function. Now, the if function allows for us to ask a question. If the answer is true, it does something. If the answer is false, it does something different. So it's a Boolean factor. So what we're going to do first is set up what the criteria is. Let's all click into N1. In N1, we're just going to say that the passing score has to be greater than or equal to. So that's all we're writing in N1. Passing score is greater than or equal to. Then in O1, we'll say that if it's greater than or equal to 65, we'll just put a 65 in there. So if it's greater than or equal to 65, if that's true, they pass. If that's not true, then they fail. What we'll do is click now into our pass-fail column, and we're going to start off with our equal sign, type in the if function, and then press the tab key to open up the parentheses. And it's going to ask us for three different things. The logical expression, which is the question we're asking, the value if it was true, and the value if it's false. So the first thing, the logical expression is this number here, the average score in N4, greater than or equal to whatever's in O1, right? 65. So is 88 greater than or equal to 65? Now we know that's true. It is greater than. So when we put the comma, it's now asking us, what do you want to do if it's true? Well, if it's true, we want to write the word pass. Now it's important to note that in Google Sheets, it doesn't recognize just the word pass. We have to actually put it in what's known as a string of text. So we're going to do double quote, write the word, and then end quote. And now if 88 is greater than or equal to 65, it'll write the word pass. But we also have to figure out, by putting our comma, what would happen if it was not true. Well, if it was not true, it would be they fail. So we would write the word fail. And then we can close that parentheses. So it's asking the question, is whatever's in N4, which is 88, greater than or equal to whatever's in O1, which is 65? If that's true, write the word pass. If it's not true and it's false, write fail. When we press enter, it says pass, which is perfect. Now, of course, we're going to want to use autofill, right? We don't want to have to write that 9 more times. So we can autofill. But you're going to notice something in a moment. If we go to autofill right now, look, this passed, that makes sense. But why did this person fail? They got a 72. 72 is greater than 65. Or 90 failed. I mean, this one, yeah, we get it. This one shouldn't be. This one, yes. This one shouldn't be. This one shouldn't be. And so on and so forth. So there's something wrong here. And if you've noticed when we were doing total attendance, right, it did the sum of F4 through I4, and it did F5 through I5. It followed that relative pattern, right? Relative cell reference. F6 to I6, F7 to I7. Same thing here when we did the averages. It did average of K4 to M4, K5 to M5, K6 to M6. So there's a pattern going on. But when we autofilled here, look what happens. N401. Oh, N502. There's nothing there. N603. So the N is perfect. We want that to move. N4, N5, N6, N7. Because we want to take all of this and compare it to this one cell. So we actually have to use not relative cell reference, but we have to use what's known as absolute cell reference, where we lock the O1 so it doesn't move when we use autofill. So we're going to do this again, but this time we're going to use absolute cell reference in our function here. So let's do equals if tab open the parentheses. It's the same expression. We're saying take whatever's in N4, and if it's greater than or equal to O1. But this time, we're going to put a dollar sign, known as anchors, in front of the O and in front of the 1. Now, I will say there is an awesome keyboard shortcut for this, so you don't have to constantly put in the dollar signs like this one at a time. You can use the function 4 key. So if you look up above your keyboard, you'll see F1 through F12, and you're going to want to hit the F4. Now, if the F4 doesn't work when you first hit it, you might have to hold down the FN key, which is usually in the bottom left-hand corner of your keyboard, and that turns on the function key so they work. So for me, I'll press F4, and boom, put in the dollar sign. It saves you a lot of time. Now that we have the dollar signs in locking the O1, we can finish the rest of our expression. So we'll say pass, and then if it's false, fail. So it's the same exact thing as before, except this time we're locking the O1. And when I press enter, it works beautifully. And now it says, well, Joe, we see that you locked the O1. We can now do autofill. And I'll say yes. So now if we look, N4, O1, N5, O1, stayed O1, it got locked in, N6, O1, and so on and so forth. So sometimes we do need to use absolute cell reference instead of utilizing relative cell reference. So try this out. Hopefully this works perfectly for you. We see we have 3 fails because they're less than 65, and then the rest are passing. So try this out on your own, and then when we come back, we're going to actually format this worksheet, talk about some of the other cool features that Google Sheets has to offer. What we're going to be learning about next is how we can format. Now, we have here a pretty just simplistic look of our data. But what happens if I want to add some color to this? Well, what we can do is we can just go in and we can format our headers. We can just go to the top and use some of these formatting tools. Maybe I want to bold the headers. Maybe I want to underline the headers. And if you don't see underline here, you can always go to the Format tab, Text, and you'll see all of the different options. And then we can choose Underline. Maybe I want to make these headers a different color. Maybe I want to put the fill color on, and let's fill it with a light blue. So right there, we're already adding some color to this. I'll just readjust all of my widths there, and it looks great. But not only can we do this, I'm going to actually use Control-Z to undo everything I just did, and I wanted to talk to you about different themes. Now, when you go into the Format tab, you'll see that there's an overarching theme here, and you can choose whatever theme you like. Now, if you start choosing these themes, they use different colors and different font styles, so whichever one makes sense to you, you can do. But what I really like is this option here. It adds color to the entire table. If you go up to the Format tab, you can then go over to the alternating colors. And what that does is it looks at your data and it creates a header color and then alternating colors afterwards. which I think is awesome. So I'm going to go in to Format, Alternating Colors, and then choose whatever color I like. You can choose whichever one makes sense for you. And then once you choose one of these default styles, you can then go in and change each one. So I might go with this blue. I actually like this one a little better. And maybe I'll change this to even different color like that. Maybe a gray. There it is. And now we have a nice style. And then once the style is done, we can click Done. And look at that. Now we have readability, alternating rows, and our headers look nice. And then, of course, we can add in more to this. We want to bold or even underline those. We can, and then we'll make those a little bigger. And everything looks perfect. The last thing I may want to do here, just to make it look really nice, is just center everything. I like that centered look. Look at that. That just looks perfect. So now we have a formatted sheet. You're more than welcome to change this. Maybe I want to make this a little bigger, or maybe I want this, student information going across. We can call it student information or student yearly information, whatever you want to put in here. And then we can take this and we can actually go across and we can make this a certain size. So maybe I want it to go all the way to here and merge and center, or maybe I want this passing score to go somewhere else. You can always move these. And what's great about this is even if you click and drag and move this, let's say down here, it'll keep the reference point. So now I'll say that it's looking at N8 and B15 instead of where it was in the O1. So it does update dynamically. Now we can select all of these, and we're going to use our merge and center. So we'll merge all, and then of course we'll center this. I'll make this bold, I'll make it bigger, and maybe I'll add in some sort of color to this, maybe a nice little gray here. Or we can even, if we wanted to, copy this look using this format painter, and we can apply it to this look. And we can even choose what color we want. So totally up to you on how you want this. I might even add that color down here too, just because I want to keep everything consistent. I think that looks great. And now we have our score here. We'll make that a little bigger. Maybe put it to here. Awesome. And I think this looks awesome. You can format this once again any way you want. All right, so take a moment, try that out on your own, format whatever you like, however you want, choose your favorite colors, and then once we're done, I'm going to actually showcase a couple other cool features like checkboxes and other things that Google has to offer. What we're going to be exploring next is checkboxes. I really like them because they're actually Boolean factors. If you check mark it, it's true, and if it's not checked, then it's false. And because of this, we can do many different things like conditional formatting, if functions, count if functions, and so on and so forth. So let's create a new worksheet here. We're going to go to the bottom and click the little plus icon. And you may have also noticed that I renamed my student info 2024. So it might have said sheet 1 for all of you, but if you click the drop down, remember we can always rename the sheet or even duplicate it for the next year. Once I click the plus symbol, however, it creates a blank worksheet. And in this worksheet, I'm actually going to zoom in here. I'm going to go to maybe 125. That looks good. And we're going to do a project alpha. Underneath, we'll just have a couple of quick little things here. Let's do task name and the status. I'll then bold and underline those. And next, we'll do task 1. And I'll just keep this very generic. We'll go through like task 1 through task 10, something like that. Perfect. And then I'll highlight everything next to it and go to the Insert tab. And inside of that Insert tab, we'll click on Checkbox. Now, once we click on Checkbox, it'll insert a checkbox in there. for all of them. And once again, if you click into it, you'll see false. And if you check mark it, it's true. So if it's check marked, true. If it's not, false. And because of this, we can actually do conditional formatting and even count. So that's what we're going to do. But before that, we can also change the format of these checkboxes by going to the text and then changing the text color. I'm going to use blue. It's my favorite. So you can have company logos and themes. Next up, I'm going to actually I'm going to just say total, and I'm just going to create a simple function here where we count if it's true. Because remember, if you check mark it, it's true. If you don't, it's false. And I'll do equals count if, press tab to open the parentheses, select my range, which is from B4 to B13. And from my criterion, it's going to be true. Because if it's true, that means it's check marked. Now, once I press enter, it'll say 0. And then once we start checking, it'll do a count. You can even get a little more complex with this by adding in strings of text. You can do ampersand sign, which concatenates or combines things together. And I'm just going to put a little slash. And you have to put the slash in quotes. We'll then do another ampersand, and I'm going to do a count A. Count A will count everything that you select. So I'm going to select B4 to B13 again, and then close that parentheses. So all we're doing is saying, take the count of how many are checked, put a slash, and take a count of all of them total. And that will give me 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10, and so on and so forth. Now that we've done that, another thing we can do is we can actually use conditional formatting. Now we're going to learn about conditional formatting in the next video, so we'll get a little deeper into those skills. But for this video, I'll just do it quickly and I'll explain. First thing we need to do is select the data we want to affect. Then we go to the Format tab, and inside of the Format tab, that's where you'll find conditional formatting. We'll give that a click. Next up, it'll say, okay, we're going to apply the format to the range, but how do you want to do that? What are the rules? Well, the rule is if it's check marked, so I want it to look here, and if that's true, which conditional formats are automatically by default true, then it'll do whatever you want. So I'm going to use actually a custom formula, and I'm going to say starting with B4, right? So I'm going to do equals V4, and I'll put a $sign in front of the B because I want it to stay in B. So we're absoluting the column, but we're not actually putting an absolute on the 4. That way it goes to look in B4, then it goes to B5, B6, B7, and so on and so forth. I don't need it to look into C, D, or E, but I do need it to stay in the B column. So that's what it'll do. And now I can just choose what I want. So I'm going to choose to bold it, strike it through, and I'll make this look like that. That looks perfect. And you can also, maybe I'll make this green. Awesome. So now whenever you check mark something, we'll cross it off, make it green and bold. And boom, then we can have everything done. So as you can see, checkboxes aren't just for the look of checking something off, but they can be really functional with other things like conditional formatting, or also utilizing things like count if, or count all, or count A, right? So try this out on your own. And when we come back, we'll get into our closing, and then we'll talk about what's up next for the next video. All right, everyone. I want to say thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this course. What we're going to be doing is our next course, our next video, and it'll be Google Sheets Intermediate. There we'll talk about how we can create a table, do some things like sorting and filtering those tables, being able to visualize our data using charts and spark lines. And then also, we'll be getting into things like formatting, conditional formats, and data validation, and also being able to create comments for collaboration. So we have a ton of fun stuff we're going to be doing in the next video. So feel free to check that out. And I hope you all enjoyed this one. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you all next time.